In the heart of the mighty Persian Empire, a young Jewish woman named Esther lived a quiet life. Orphaned as a child, she was raised by her loving cousin, Mordecai, who cherished her as his own daughter. They lived among their people, a minority in a vast and powerful land, holding on to their traditions in the sprawling city of Susa. Meanwhile, King Xerxes, the ruler of this great empire, was searching for a new queen. He held a grand pageant, gathering the most beautiful young women from every corner of his kingdom. On Mordecai's advice, Esther joined the candidates, but she kept her Jewish heritage a secret, a quiet promise between her and the man who raised her. From the moment the king laid eyes on Esther, he was captivated. Her grace, her quiet strength, her inner beauty shone brighter than any jewel. He chose her above all others, and in a lavish ceremony, Esther, the humble orphan, was crowned queen of Persia. She moved into the royal palace, a world of unimaginable luxury and power, but her heart remained with her people and with Mordecai. Mordecai spent his days near the palace gate, always watching, always listening, ensuring his beloved Esther was safe. One day, he overheard two of the king's guards plotting to assassinate King Xerxes. Acting quickly, Mordecai sent a message to Esther, who bravely informed the king. The plot was foiled, the guards were punished, and Mordecai's loyalty was recorded in the royal chronicles, though for the moment, it went unrewarded. Soon after, a new man rose to power in the king's court, Haman, a vain and cruel nobleman. The king promoted him to the highest position in the empire, second only to the king himself. King Xerxes commanded everyone to bow down to Haman as a sign of respect. Everyone obeyed, except for one man, Mordecai. He refused to bow, for he would only bow to his God. Haman was consumed by rage. His pride was wounded, and his fury wasn't just for Mordecai. It grew into a monstrous hatred for all of Mordecai's people. He saw an entire nation in one man's defiance. Poisoning the king's ear with lies, Haman claimed the Jewish people were rebellious and a threat to the empire. He deviously convinced King Xerxes to issue a decree. On a specific day, every Jewish man, woman, and child in the empire was to be annihilated. The terrible decree was sent out across the land, sealed with the king's own ring. When Mordecai learned of the plot, he was devastated. He tore his clothes and covered himself in sackcloth and ashes, a sign of deep mourning. All throughout the empire, a great cry of anguish rose from the Jewish people as they faced their impending doom. Mordecai knew there was only one person who might be able to save them. He sent a message to Queen Esther, begging her to go before the king and plead for her people. But Esther was terrified. There was a strict law in Persia. Anyone who approached the king without being summoned would be put to death, unless the king held out his golden scepter. Esther had not been called to see the king in 30 days. She could be executed for trying. Mordecai's reply was urgent and powerful. He reminded her that being queen would not save her from the decree. He asked her, "Who knows? Perhaps you have come to your royal position for such a time as this." His words struck Esther's heart. She realized her life, her position, her entire journey had led to this single, terrifying moment. This was her purpose, finding a new, profound courage. Esther made her decision. She sent a message back to Mordecai, asking him to gather all the Jews in Susa to fast and pray for her for 3 days. She and her maids would do the same, and then, she declared, "I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." After 3 days of fasting and prayer, Esther put on her finest royal robes. With her heart pounding, she walked through the palace courts and stood at the entrance to the king's throne room, visible to him, but unsummoned. It was the ultimate gamble. Her life and the lives of her people hung in the balance. The king sat on his throne, and when he saw her, his expression softened. A miracle. He held out his golden scepter. Esther approached, and the king asked what she wanted, promising to give her anything, up to half of his kingdom. But instead of revealing her plea immediately, Esther was wise. She simply invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. Haman was thrilled, his ego soaring. He was being honored by the queen herself. But as he left the palace, he saw Mordecai at the gate, still refusing to bow. All his joy turned to ash. When he got home, Haman boasted to his family about his importance, but complained bitterly about Mordecai's disrespect. His wife and friends gave him a wicked suggestion: build a towering gallows, 75 feet high, and in the morning, ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai on it. Haman loved the idea and had the gallows built that very night. But that same night, the king couldn't sleep. He asked for the royal chronicles to be read to him. As he listened, he heard the story of how Mordecai had saved his life from the assassination plot. "What honor or reward has been given to Mordecai for this?" the king asked. "Nothing has been done for him," his servants replied. Just then, Haman arrived at the palace, early in the morning, eager to ask the king to hang Mordecai. Before Haman could speak, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Haman, in his arrogance, thought the king must be talking about him. So he described a lavish ceremony. The man should wear the king's own royal robe, ride the king's own horse, and be led through the city streets by a high-ranking noble, proclaiming, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." "Excellent," the king said. "Go at once and do all of that for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the palace gate. Do not leave out a single detail." Haman was horrified. He had no choice but to obey. He had to lead his mortal enemy through the city, shouting his praises, in the shadow of the very gallows he had built for him. It was a complete and utter humiliation. Later that day, Haman went to Esther's second banquet, his spirit crushed. Again, the king asked Esther what she wanted. This time, with tears in her eyes and her voice trembling with emotion, Esther revealed everything. "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, grant me my life, this is my petition, and spare my people, this is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king was shocked. "Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing?" And Esther, pointing directly at the terrified nobleman, declared, "The adversary and enemy is this wicked Haman." The king erupted in fury. As he stormed out into the palace garden, Haman, desperate to save his own life, fell on Esther's couch to beg for mercy. When the king returned and saw Haman in that position, he misinterpreted it as an attack on the queen. "Will he even assault the queen while I am in the house?" he roared. That was the final straw. The king's guard seized Haman. One of the servants pointed out the massive gallows Haman had built for Mordecai. The king gave the order, "Hang him on it." And so, Haman was executed on the very gallows he had prepared for his enemy. The king gave Haman's entire estate to Queen Esther. He also took his signet ring, the symbol of his authority, from Haman and gave it to Mordecai, placing him in Haman's powerful position. But the original decree to destroy the Jews still stood. Esther went before the king again, weeping, and begged him to cancel Haman's evil plan. A king's decree could not be revoked, but he could issue a new one. King Xerxes gave Esther and Mordecai permission to write a new decree in his name. This new law granted the Jewish people across the empire the right to assemble and defend themselves, to fight back against anyone who would attack them on the appointed day. When the day of destruction arrived, the tables had turned. With the support of the king's officials, who now feared Mordecai, the Jewish people successfully defended themselves against their enemies. Instead of a day of sorrow, it became a day of victory and celebration. Esther's courage, born from a moment of terror, had saved her entire nation. The story of her bravery and faith has been remembered ever since, a powerful reminder that one person's selfless act can change the course of history. Thanks for watching. If you were inspired by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content.